We are changing colour again this week, and this time it's the green and yellow of John Deere. So for those of you that don't know, green for John Deere and yellow for John Deere. The green is represents growth, and the yellow represents a harvest. So that's where, when John Deere were designing their colour schemes for their machines, that's where the colour came from. That's what it signifies. John Deere at this stage, as we all know, the largest manufacturer of agricultural equipment in the world. A fantastic history of machines back from the 1800s. Now, anyone that has not seen my video on John Deere himself, the actual person John Deere that founded the company, you can look back to our catalogue of videos, and there is a video on John Deere himself. But we're starting with the machines today, and this is the first video in a line of videos that I am going to be doing on John Deere tractors and John Deere combines, and we will be looking at some of the mowers and bits and pieces like that as we go along through the series of videos. This particular video we're looking at from the inception of the tractors, the very first tractors, right through to post World War II area, so into the late 1940s. We'll take it up to that. I'm going to do about 4 or 5 videos on the tractors, or maybe one a month for the next few months, taking us up to 1992, so the end of what would have been the Soundguard cab era before the 6,000 range, and that came in, 6, 7, 8,000 range come in. I'm going to do a video a week up until that. We'll take a break then, and I'll move on to maybe some of the combines and stuff like that. But yeah, this week it's all about the start of John Deere tractors, and welcome back to the channel, everybody, and everybody that has commented on my previous videos. The Marshall one last week was very popular, and got some great feedback and some great conversation about that video as well. So thanks to everyone, and thanks to all the new subscribers. Anyone that is a new subscriber, if go back and check out all our old videos. There's loads of stuff there. We're up on nearly 60 videos now at this stage, and we have reached the 2,000 subscriber mark. So welcome to everybody that has subscribed, and thank you all so much for the support. So we'll start with John Deere. Right, okay. Well, an interesting fact that John Deere, the man himself, he actually never seen a tractor. So not alone did he never see one of his own tractors, he never seen an actual physical working tractor. He was a blacksmith, as we spoke about, and he died in the late 1800s before the invention of the first tractor. That is what I'm led to believe anyway, but as I always say, if I make any mistakes in these videos, I have to do a lot of research, and I don't always get everything right. So if anybody has anything to say, please drop a comment and let me know. If I've made some mistakes, I'll hold my hands up and I'll be the first to say thanks for that. Anyway, the first tractor. So most people, when they think about John Deere tractors, the first tractor they think about is the Waterloo Boy. But it's not actually, that actually was not their first dip into the area of powered tractors. So you're into the late 1800s, early 1900s. Horses were becoming a thing of the past. People were looking to modernize. There was a lot of manufacturing going on in the Midwest in America, and the first tractor that John Deere looked at, the John Deere the Dain tractor. So this has a long, complicated history. Experimental work on this tractor dates back to 1914. The inventor himself was a man called Joseph Dain Sr. There was a few experimental machines put out each year up until about 1918, when approximately 100 of these tractors were built. So the entire 100 machines were later then sold on to John Deere as they wanted to get into the tractor business. So this was their entrance into it. Now, this was a very, very particular tractor. It was called the Dain all-wheel drive. Now, it wasn't all-wheel as in 4-wheel drive. It was 3-wheel drive. So this tractor had 2 front wheels and 1 rear wheel. So it was a trike in reverse, basically. A very, very unique looking machine. But I suppose when you look at it, you can understand maybe why it didn't become more popular than it did. So these machines were built in a factory located on 10th Street in East Illinois. So this is where John Deere Harvester Works began its existence. So Elmer McCormick, who later became the chief engineer at John Deere's Waterloo plant, supervised the manufacturing. So so moving on from that then. So John Deere, while it was their dipping their toe into the water of tractors, obviously this 3-wheel 4-cylinder machine, it wasn't going to be the ideal situation. So they had 2 options. So John Deere had narrowed it down the two options. So they go with the 4-cylinder all-wheel drive three-wheeler design and make it themselves, or purchase a company that came up for sale called the Waterloo Gasoline Engine Company of Waterloo, Iowa, and use their already proven their Waterloo Boy tractor. Deere chose the 2-cylinder Waterloo Boy partly because it believed the 2-cylinder design was simple and less expensive than that of the Waterloo Boy. It was less expensive, and that the Waterloo Boy had already established itself as a successful tractor. So, talking about my history with John Deere, as everybody knows, I'm a big Massey Ferguson fan, but I'm more of a John Deere fan. I grew up with John Deere, so I grew up from being able to walk. My dad works for a John Deere dealership, as anyone that knows him knows, and he is with it since 1979, and he's still there to this day, so over 45 years. So I grew up as a young lad in the parts department, in the workshop, helping out the mechanics all through the 80s, sweeping floors. I split my first tractor when I was 14 on my own, a John Deere 2140. I used to take off cabs when I was a teenager. So I worked there on the weekends, and I worked in the evenings, and I worked all through the summer. I spent my summers in the middle of John Deere combines with a wire brush, cleaning them out before harvest time. But I loved it, and I loved it, and I loved the brand. So I grew up with them, and I have a great emotional attachment with them. All my happy childhood memories from the 80s and the 90s pretty much revolved around John Deere tractors. So that is why I have such a great love for them. The Waterloo Boy tractor then was the last and the first tractor produced by Deere and Company before adopting the John Deere brand. So you have to remember that John Deere is only a brand name. So that's the name they put on the tractors, on the combines, on their industrial equipment. The actual name of the company is Deere. Deere and Company is the name of the company. John Deere is just the brand name. So yeah, the Waterloo Boy was the last of these tractors produced by Deere and Company to adopt the John Deere brand with the Model D. And in 1918, the Waterloo Boy, it drew about 25 horsepower from its 2-cylinder engine. The engine ran on kerosene, a fuel that farmers, could acquire easily, and it was less expensive than gasoline, or petrol as we call it. The tractor had 2 forward gears and 1 reverse gear, and spent much of its time, this particular one in the picture, spent much of its time working around North Dakota. So the Waterloo Boy is part of the legacy of John Froelich, I think it's pronounced, of Iowa. And he built the first gasoline engine tractor in 1892. Deere and Company acquired Froelich's Waterloo engine company, the Waterloo Boy engine company, in 1918, and continued to improve on the Waterloo Boy tractors until 1923. So it had a decent span. So how much did they pay for it? So on March 14th, which we're coming up on now, 1918, the company turned its attention to tractors, paying $2.1 million to the Waterloo Boy company. Quite a lot of money back in the day. So the engine company and their Waterloo Boy tractors as well. So today that would look something around $35 million mark. That was in its first year in business. Then after that, John Deere sold approximately 5,600 of these kerosene powered machines. So moving on from that, then the tractor that really set them on their way, I should say, was the Model D. Now, I'm going to give a brief overview of all these tractors up till 1942 or the mid 40s, but I will be doing a more in-depth look, a video in particular, on a couple of these models, because a couple of them are very significant. So when you look at the Model D and the Model A, they were very, very significant tractors for John Deere at the time. And I will be doing another in-depth video on these particular tractors and all its different variants in the future. So here we're just going to do a quick run through. So the Model D, despite the rather severe farm economy depression at the time, John Deere and Company management decided to build the Model D prototype in 1923. Now, this tractor was designed by a man called Muir L. Frey. Now, anyone that knows anything about engineering in America will know that a man called Donald N. Frey, he was the man who designed the Ford Mustang. So it was actually his father that designed the Model D. So, the good engineering family there, two American icons. So the Deere Model D was produced from March the 1st, 1923 to July the 3rd, 1953, the longest production span of the 2-cylinder John Deere tractors, and over 160,000 of these models were made. and they are a very iconic machine. When you look at the span of them, from the first Model D to the last Model D, they went from steel wheels, steel claws, right the way through to spoke wheels, right the way through to tired machines. And I will be doing a good video on those later in the coming months. So the first Model D rode, as I said, it rode on steel wheels. It had a 6.5 two-cylinder hand-cranked engine rated to roughly 27 horsepower. So this was not, however, the first John Deere to bear the Deere name, as we spoke about. As the Deere experimental tractors, the John Deere Dain all-wheel drive tractor, of which approximately 100 were produced during 1918 and 1919, had carried the Deere name before the Model D. So by 1925, Deere and Company realised that the standard Model D did not meet customers' needs for industrial applications. Steel wheels were not suitable for hard surfaces, and the gearing was too slow for safe road speeds. Solid rubber tyres were added, and engineers fitted a 28-tooth sprocket to the final drive, giving it a whopping road speed of 4 miles per hour. So the company then later replaced the 7.6 litre two-cylinder engine with an 8.2 litre two-cylinder engine. In 1926, Deere and Company advertised the model as the John Deere Industrial Tractor with 40.8 inch rear wheels and 24.35 on the front. This became known as the DI options, which included wheel weights and stuff like that. So it was the Model D Industrial, the DI. So moving on then to the Model C. The Model C was an earlier version of what became the Model GP. Now, the Model GP was another hugely significant and very, very well sold tractor for John Deere. So the Model C was the early version of the GP. So tractors in the chassis range from 200,001 to 200,110. were built from August 1927 through to January 1928, so obviously a very short production run, and they were then recalled. So 53 of the pre-production models were with the new serial numbers. In June of 1928, a decision was made to rename the tractor as the GP. So in total, I think about 92 of these tractors were built. And the reason that they changed from the name C to GP, what I'm led to believe is when dealers and salesmen were ordering tractors from the factory, C sounded too much like D, and there was confusion. Some people received a Model D when they wanted a Model C, and some people received a Model C when they wanted Model D. It just sounded too alike, so they went and called it the GP. So when we look at the Model GP then, so on June the 20th, 1928, the model designation was changed from C to GP to avoid confusion with the D when dealers were phoning in orders from the factory. So GP stands for General Purpose. The new Model GP had the same horsepower, engine displacement, weight and 3-speed transmission as the Model C. The GP's first serial number was 200,211. And in 1930, the GP was updated with a 25 horsepower engine, 5.56 litres, I believe it is. So if you look at a modern engine today, if you had an engine with 5.5 litres in it and you're only getting 25 horsepower, you'd feel a little bit hard done by. Well, the Model GP then, it was built in 5 distinct versions throughout the course of its production. The standard front GP, or John Deere Standard, built from March 1928 to 1935. Then you had the John Deere two-wheel tricycle front GP, or GP tricycle as it was commonly known, of which 23 units were built between August 1928 and April 1929. Then you had the John Deere GP wide tread, or GPWT, built from November 1929 to November 1933. The John Deere GP wide tread Series P, a GPWT with narrowed rear tread width designed to suit potato rows, built between January and August 1930. So the last one then on the list was the John Deere, it was the GPO, so the GP Orchard from April 1931 to April 1935. This tractor had standardized shielding for groves and orchards around low-hanging branches and stuff. Some GPOs were fitted with crawler undercarriage from Lindemann Brothers in Washington, and these are commonly known as the GP Lindemann. Moving into 1929 then, so Deere and Company, so they made their first what was called the unstyled model of tractors. So the unstyled row crop tractor in 1929. So this was to compete with the Farmall. So it had been introduced at the time, and there was a lot of competition there between the two models. So yeah, the unstyled, it was a modified GP tractor with adjustable rear axle track, distance between the wheels on the same axle, and a narrower front end. In 1933, Deere started experimenting with what would become known as the Model A. So that became the famous Model A, one of the most popular tractors across the world. There's plenty of them here in Ireland as well. They are a tractor that I've seen and I've actually sat up on and driven. So the new Model A went into production in 1934. The A launched John Deere into the row crop farming market. So the A was by far the most popular two-cylinder tractor that John Deere and Company had produced at that stage, with 290,000 models produced. The next year, the Model B was introduced, and it was a third smaller than the Model A, which made it ideal for smaller farms. So they were not alone with the building tractors now, they were building them in different ranges and different sizes to suit different applications. So a few years later, the Model G was introduced in 1937, and it remained an unstyled tractor for several more years than the A and the B. The unstyled tractors launched Deere and Company into the row crop farming market, which they are still a major part of today. The model designation was actually labelled on the support between the rear seat and the platform, and this continued on the styled tractors until 1947. The Deere and Company very nearly went bankrupt in the Great Depression. Only a large order of tractors for the Soviet Union kept the company going. So you can say what you want about the Russians, but they like to buy their tractors. When we look at the production run then of the John Deere Model A, 1934 to 1939, Model B, 1935 to 1939, the Model D was 1923 to 1939, and the Model G was 1939 to 1941. So getting up into the late 1930s then, and you would have had companies then like your Massey Harris's and your Ferguson's starting to make tractors. And these tractors were a little bit more stylish, I suppose. They were a little bit more appealing to the eye. They were more streamlined back in the day. Now you might look at them today and you might think that a Model A or a clean Model A or a Model D was a far nicer looking tractor than a grey Ferguson or something. That just was more appeal about them, more style about them. But back in the day, it was all about streamlined and smooth bonnets and whatnot. So in 1937, John Deere hired a well-known industrial designer called Henry Dreyfuss from New York City to restyle Deere and Company's agricultural equipment, especially his tractors. Now, Henry Dreyfuss was well known at the time for styling things like trains, and he designed hoovers for different companies, and just to make things more appealing looking, I suppose, to the industrial in the industrial market, and products that people would be buying for their homes and stuff, like hoovers and stuff. That's what he done. He was a very, very famous industrial designer. So in the fall of 1939, a John Deere tractor engineer was sent to New York to ask Henry Dreyfuss to redesign the tractors. So legend has it that Dreyfuss was so intrigued by the project that he took a train to Waterloo that very night. Dreyfuss learned to operate the tractors and work with them in the field to gain first-hand knowledge of the changes that he needed to make. So I suppose modern day you call that, ergonomics. So if you want to know how to design something to work better, you have to feel your way around. You have to know what's needed. So modern ergonomics, that's what he was doing at the time. Learned to drive the tractor, learned where all the controls should be and how it should look and stuff. So the first two-letter series tractors, the A and the B, were the first to receive a new styling, and other models were later added. Dreyfuss styling was intended to help Deere and Company compete with the forthcoming Farmall tractors, which, along with the Ford Ferguson, were John Deere's largest competitors at the time. So this is where we move into the styled end of tractors. You had the Model A unstyled and you had the Model A styled. So there's two different variants of them. That's very important to remember. So Dreyfuss and the Waterloo engineers perfected the styling design, and that was used in all John Deere tractors with only minor changes right through to 1959. In the 1930s and the 1940s saw a large number of different John Deere models emerged as small farmers emerging from the depression troubles increasingly turned from horses to tractors. Deere's GM model, the GM model was introduced in 1942 and was made until 1947. Engine power was increased to 38 horsepower, 28 kilowatts, and a 6-speed transmission was also added. The G model got a restyled front at this point, as did the other John Deere tractor models. The GM, or the G modernised, as we call it, the modernised, had an electric start, lights added to its options. During its production line, the G tractor was available in high crop and a single front wheel version. The G was restyled in 1941, but did not start to roll off the assembly line until 1942. Like the smaller A and B tractors, the G model had the 6-speed transmission added to it. So in 1946 Model D had an 8.2 litre engine, which was enormous for the day. 2 new additions to the tractor line, the M and the R models, were also added. So after the models A and B got new restyling, both tractors were given the 6-speed transmission in the late 1940s. The A was up to 29 horsepower at this stage from a 5.26 litre engine, while the smaller B was 18 and 23 horsepower, reflecting the earlier and later models between 1938 to 1946. The Model H was given the Dreyfus look from the time and was introduced in 1938. The H is famous for breaking a fuel economy record at the time when it was tested in Nebraska. So this tractor also had 3 variants that came out in 1940 to 1941. The H tractor was 14 horsepower out of a 1.5 litre engine and had a 3-speed transmission. And this is a lovely little small compact little tractor that was very, very popular back in its day. In 1947 then all models operator platforms were updated with a cushion seat, new steering wheels, lights, batteries, electric starting, and which resulted in an enclosed flywheel. When you think about them up to then, the flywheel was on the side of the engine. It was a big round, so obviously it was dangerous, I suppose, but the flywheel was used to start the engine on the ones that didn't have the electric start. So you'd get out and you'd rock it and you'd look for the compression, and then you'd pull the flywheel to get them going. So in 1939 then, the restyled Model D appeared. So the D was 42 horsepower at this stage and weighed approximately 5,300 pounds. Options available were obviously electric lights and electric start. So in 1940 then, in August 1940, Deere & Company introduced the new Model LA, which was followed by the Model LI. So obviously the L industrial. The LA had a 1.26 litre engine with a 14 belt horsepower. In 1947 then, Deere & Company opened a new factory in Iowa, built to produce John Deere's Model M. So the Model M was created to address the increasing demand for small tractors and compete with the increasingly popular Ford and the smaller farm model tractors. The M was the second John Deere tractor to use the vertical 2-cylinder after the Model LA. So when you think of the Model L, all our models up until that had been horizontal engines. So the engines ran flat out the side. The Model L and the Model M then, they were vertical. And if you look at the Model L, I think it is a beautiful little tractor. It's it's like something you'd see in a cartoon. I think it's a fantastic looking machine. I've never seen any of them around Ireland. There probably is someplace, Ireland or the UK or whatever, but I've never seen any of them. If you have one, or if you've had one or driven one, I'd love to hear about it. And indeed, anyone that has seen or has any of these models up until the mid 1940s, any of the A, the B, the H, the D, the G, the LA, the M, any of those, the GPs, any of them that has any of them, please get in contact with me, because I'd love to see them. I'd love to go out and I'd love to visit and do a video on some of these fantastic tractors. So look, that's it. That was the range up until the mid 1940s, pretty much. There was a tractor there for everybody at that stage. There was, for your orchards, for the small man, for the larger farmer, and then for ploughing and stuff like that at the time. There's some brilliant videos on YouTube of guys out ploughing with the different models of Model D and stuff. There's collectors all around the country, mainly in America, that have some great stuff. And I love looking at them. I will be doing more of them in detail of some of those particular models. I will be looking at them a little bit closer at their engineering. But that is it for today's video. Thanks a million to everybody for watching. Please, in the comments, give us a shout out if you like the video, if you got anything out of it, if you have any of these tractors or driven any of these tractors. Please give us a shout out. And next weekend we'll be moving away to something different. It's not going to be John Deere, it's not going to be Massey Ferguson. It is a brand of tractor that I have had a lot of requests for. People have texted me, people have emailed me, and people have wrote in the comments, could you please do a video on this particular type of tractor? And I'm not going to tell anyone until next weekend what it is, but if you have an idea, put it in the comments, and the first person to get it right, I'll think of something. I'll throw you a John Deere hat or something. I'll give you something. The first person to get this model right, this brand of tractor, the first people to get it right will get something. I'll throw you out something. Only the people that watch to the end of this video are obviously going to get this competition. So anyway, that's it. I'll see you all next Sunday. I'm off to take it handy and do some more research, obviously, to keep you people entertained. So take care, and I will talk to you all during the week.